one of the biggest dichotomies in episodes was in the first part of episode 2, we had 2 back-to-back episodes on opportunity zones. And, opportunity zone investing was created under the Tax Relief Act in Trump's first term. And the idea of an opportunity zone is to identify some acreage or, areas of town, let's say, that are in poverty and underserved, and then create an incentive for developers and capital to better that land, those buildings, and create more opportunities with that capital. And I think with opportunity zone investing was a really interesting perspective that in 1 hour, probably an hour and a half in Chicago, I talked with an individual who is responsible for tens of thousands of acres of managing corn and soybean land for a larger institutional, finance company. And that farmland then winds up in pension plans and institutional dollars. And we talked about what a great idea opportunity zone investing was and how it increased the yield and production in the field and created jobs from the fact that we're putting in, tile and occasionally solar and wind and those other assets to create more value to the farmer. And in turn, more value to the investment company. And the literal, he walks out, and we had this great interview, and it turned into a great podcast episode. And I get water, and I sit down, and I'm suddenly zooming in with 2 advisors from Detroit who couldn't be more on the other side of the political spectrum than the gentleman I just talked to. But yet, it was almost the same conversation, because we wound up talking about opportunity zones, how they've changed Detroit, how we have less crime, how we have more infrastructure and buildings, how we have nicer places to live, how we have green centers, how we have greenhouses where you can actually get fresh produce, the places that used to be a food desert, using that same sort of tax incentive investment structure that we talked about earlier. And that commonality really got me thinking about ag in a different way, right? I think a lot of the time when I first got into this, I had this conception that I'd worked in financial services with dentists and with doctors and cardiologist groups, and I kind of had this idea of how to work with small businesses. And needless to say, I know how to work with small businesses, help establish retirement accounts, make sure that the ownership is in the right method, that we have the right corporate structures. And then when one of those people wants to get out of the business, how do we navigate that sell? And then estate planning around the key players in those businesses. And those are very cash-heavy businesses, and they can be worth quite a bit. That was my experience before working with farms and farmland. And I think the big difference with farms and farmland is there's almost the structure and the advice you're giving might be similar to working with a medical group or working with a high net worth family. But there's something about ground and food and protein and a greater good that occurs here. And I think after 2 years of it, I've kind of come to realize that that's a very real, tangible element that we see when we work with farmland and we work in agriculture.